Hello everyone. Welcome to session 3 of the Buffalo Leadership video series. I'm Jon Macaskill, retired Navy SEAL commander turned leadership and mindfulness coach. Today, I'm joined by 4 incredible leaders. Not sure that I deserve to surround myself with such amazing people. They'll introduce themselves here in a second. Together, we're here to talk about grit. Grit in leadership and how important grit is in leaders and in teams. But today, we're going to take a little twist on the typical grit you hear about. G.R.I.T. Grit, in this case, is an acronym that represents 4 essential traits that are vital to effective leaders: grace, resolve, intuition, and trust. Each of these traits, individually and as a collective, they enable leaders to navigate through challenging situations with confidence and maintain their team's trust and respect. Okay, now you may be asking, why is this the Buffalo Leadership video series? Well, the buffalo is different. The buffalo sees a storm coming, and instead of staying still, running away, or going around it, the buffalo runs straight into and through it. And we are here to help you do the same, to run straight into and thrive in any and every storm. We are doing this video series and we are running a leadership conference here in Colorado Springs, July 21st, 2023 at the Glen Erie Castle. Text the word Buffalo to 33777. That's Buffalo to 33777 to find out more. All right, so all that out of the way. Buffaloes, please introduce yourselves. Let's start with Theresa, and from there, Theresa, hand it off, and last one, hand it back to me. Theresa, over to you.
Right on. All right, hello everyone, welcome. My name is Theresa Larson. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, Marine Corps veteran. I'm a warrior through and through, and I'm a mother of 2 little boys. I have an amazing husband, and I run a business called Movement RX. I'm the founder and president of Movement RX, and we basically provide wellness and well-being content to organizations across the globe, and it's very fulfilling. And I moved my family recently to Southwest Colorado, and so we run all of our operations out of here at a grid coordinate I will not disclose on this amazing video series. But I'm very honored to be one of the co-founders of this Buffalo Leadership Academy and provide this incredibly valuable and unique content to leaders. So I will kick it over to you, Dr. Travis, Dr. T, the other Dr. T.
Thanks, Dr. T. So yeah, I'm Dr. Travis Hearne, and I will throw a disclaimer out there. And we do know that it is also known as the American bison and not just the buffalo. We've had several people come up to us and tell us like what a buffalo actually is, and it makes a lot of sense. So the buffalo that we talk about here and the American bison are one and the same. So again, Dr. Travis Hearne, I am in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and just love working with all these fine people. It's amazing. I run a leadership training and keynote organization called Titanium Leadership Coaching and Consulting, where we work with leaders to just thrive through storms, to be better than they were yesterday, to be better than they were this morning. So real passion for leadership. I'm a Marine Corps veteran as well, just like the other Dr. T. Back and forth to Iraq and Afghanistan, much like a lot of these people. And I'm grateful to be here. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Lara Jones.
Thank you, Dr. T. Well, yes, my name is Lara Jones, and I am the founder and CEO of Be a Legend. We are a leadership sales and marketing company, and we enhance leadership performance, sales performance, and also have many different marketing strategies and help on that level with any size of organization. Keeps me very busy, but I'm also trained as a neuroscience coach, and I help a lot of executives get to the next level, enhance their performance on an individual basis or as a team. With the neuroscience part, I have a bachelor's and master's in psychology. So a lot of that training is deeply, heavily embedded into the programs that we've designed and developed as a company. So, and also on the side, I'm also an athlete. So I'm very busy. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Phillip.
Hey guys, welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Phillip Koontz. I am a former Navy SEAL combat veteran, For the last 9 years, I've been a public speaker, author, and an executive life and business coach. I live out here in beautiful Monument, Colorado. I was wearing flip-flops yesterday and I'm in a coat today. So that's typical weather here in Colorado. Great to join you guys. I'm a husband and a father of 5, thrilled to be on this team, and just really excited for our topic today of grit, and learning a lot from these powerful leaders that are on the call. So John, I'll pass it back to you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, brother. And as I mentioned in the opening, I'm Jon Macaskill, retired Navy SEAL commander, turned leadership and mindfulness coach. And I too live in Monument or Colorado Springs area, and I too was rocking flip-flops yesterday and rocking a winter coat this morning. So crazy weather. So anyhow, guys, so honored to be working with you all. So honored. Let's get into this. G.R.I.T, grit, grace, resolve, intuition, and trust. Let's talk about that grace first. Grace, I feel, is an essential aspect for leaders. It involves being kind, empathetic, compassionate, treating others with that respect in all situations, even those challenging situations. We always hear of leadership challenges. Well, I tell you, being graceful in all situations, that in and of itself is a leadership challenge. Leaders with grace, they communicate effectively, they listen actively, and they provide constructive feedback. They inspire and motivate their team leaders, team members, and they create positivity and productive work environment. To develop grace, leaders need to focus on developing their emotional intelligence. We hear EI and EQ all the time. Without that, it's really hard to be graceful. So we have to, in order to develop the grace, we have to develop that emotional intelligence. We have to practice that active listening. And active listening, when I say listening, I don't just mean listening with your ears. Listening by paying attention to what people are doing, their body language, their habits. That's listening too, and you have to practice that piece of the active listening as a leader. And then showing empathy towards others, empathy and compassion. Those two are not necessarily synonymous, right? A lot of the time you'll hear them used synonymously, but they are different. Empathy is feeling the same feelings that someone else has. Compassion is taking it one step further, wanting to lend a helping hand and actually lift whoever is in this trouble out of that hole. So that's what the compassion and empathy difference is. Now, I want to turn it over to Phillip. Phillip, can you tell me what grace means to you and some examples of where you've been shown grace or where you've shown it and that made a difference?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think grace, so by the way, on a side note, I was a breacher in the SEAL team, so I was not very graceful. I just got to blow stuff up and make messes, right? So I wasn't very graceful when it comes to kicking down doors or busting through fences. So, but I heard once a really great definition of grace, and grace is giving someone something that they don't deserve. As opposed to mercy, mercy is not giving someone something they deserve. Grace is giving someone something that they don't deserve. And that's so important for great leaders. Great leaders, it's so important to show just copious amounts of grace. And John, I appreciate everything that you said that grace really encompasses. You know, and oftentimes it's hard for leaders if we're shown no grace. Oftentimes we want to kind of turn inward. It's really easy for us if we've been wronged, if we've been hurt by others, for us not to show them grace. But as great leaders, it's important to show grace, to lead by example, to demonstrate the qualities that we want to see in the people that we lead. So grace is so important for really great leaders. And I've been under a lot of leadership in my life that was kind of a void of grace. As a matter of fact, that was one of the things that propelled me to go and get my master's in leadership. Because I'm like, there's got to be great other ways to lead in a better way, and grace has a lot to do with that. I think that when you look at leaders who don't lead with grace, very authoritative, very oppressive type of leadership, I think a lot of that kind of stems from insecurities that they themselves have inside of them. Maybe they're feeling insecure about their identities. They're not real sure who they are, or maybe their world. They have a lot of storms that they're going through, and they don't know how to handle those storms. They feel very out of control inwardly, and so they try to control others out. They try to control other people and their environment outside. We would call that like more of a micromanaging type of leadership style. But that is not true of good and great leaders who demonstrate a lot of grace. Unfortunately, those leaders who are more micromanaging, what does that do? That causes a lot of carnage in the people that they are leading. And I myself, I can personally attest to just the undue pressure that people have when they're under a graceless type of leadership style. And eventually that turns to anxiety and then emotional exhaustion and burnout. But there's one word, and I've said it several times, there's one word that really distinguishes those micromanagers, those very authoritative, do as I say, not as I do type of leaders, to those good leaders, those great leaders who really strive to empower those people that they lead. And that word is grace. Graceful leaders, they empower others. They almost normalize mistakes. I've been in the military. We can all agree that it's a very punitive type of environment where you make a mistake and you got to pay the man. It's very punitive. But with grace and leaders who really express and show a lot of grace, they're willing to get messy. They're willing to get messy. They normalize those mistakes. They say, hey, you know what? It's okay if you make mistakes. As a matter of fact, I expect for you to make mistakes, but we're going to learn from those mistakes. We're going to have grace with you. We're going to learn from those mistakes, and then instead of really chastising them for those mistakes as well. So a graceful leader, a leader who demonstrates and leads with grace, they create a safe environment. They create an environment where it's really helpful for their people to learn and to grow instead of being under a lot of this undue type pressure. And the one thing that I need to continue to remind myself, as far as just a personal example, is I have to have grace with myself. I don't know about you guys, but I am always hardest on myself. And being a public speaker, I always rate my performance, right? I rate my presentations, and I'm like, oh, today that was like a B. That was like a B minus. I forgot a bunch of stuff. So I think it's really important for us to remember to not beat ourselves up, not to allow that shame to really attack our identities and internalize that. But instead to allow ourselves to give ourselves grace, to know that we're human, that we're going to mess up, and that no one's perfect, and then to learn from those mistakes, to continue to get better. I've said this before on our video series, that in the SEAL teams we have something called an AAR, after action review, and that's where we ask ourselves, hey, what went right, what went wrong, and how can we improve? And in that what went wrong category, it's important for us as leaders to show grace to the people who we're leading, and then to really capitalize on those lessons learned to see how we can get better. And then lastly, I'm a big conflict resolution guy. I kind of cringe when I say I love conflict, but I kind of do. I don't like it, but I do. I used to shy away from it. When I tell people I'm a recovering people pleaser. So this conflict has been something that I've really had to wrestle with in my life. And in your grace, as a great leader, your grace will be tested, especially during times of conflict. And like Jon said, just a lot of empathy, a lot of active listening, good active listening techniques. There's a lot of people out there that think they're great listeners. I want to encourage everyone who thinks that they are, try having a conversation where you simply just focus on what the person is saying instead of thinking of a rebuttal or thinking of what you're going to say, because in doing that, you lose 70% of what that person is saying. So really identifying with their emotion. Jon, like you said, is empathy, and then showing them that compassion and that grace is so important during conflict resolution. And then lastly, I was just going to say that grace, for those people who are maybe grace skeptics out there, or tend to lead with a heavier hand, grace is not an excuse. It's not excusing bad behavior. Grace is not letting other people off the hook. It's not minimizing things or sweeping things under the rug as if they never existed, but instead, grace allows us to help others to really learn from their mistakes and then have the opportunity to move forward instead of staying stuck in the shame that a lot of poor leadership can instill upon someone as in this very punitive, micromanaging kind of leadership environment, if that makes sense.
It does, 100%, man. And I love everything you said there about grace and psychological safety, and not if a leader does not have grace, what that causes in a culture, kind of that culture where failure is not an option. And
Yeah.
there's definitely times when failure is not an option. We've been on missions where failure has not been an option, but you can't experiment, you can't learn, you can't grow in an environment where that's the persistent culture. And grace lends itself to that. So I love that you hit on that. If you're just tuning in, we are the Buffalo Leaders, the Buffalo Leaders Academy. We're talking about G.R.I.T, grit, which in this particular case is grace, resolve, intuition, and trust. Phillip Koontz, my brother from the SEAL teams, just covered grace, and we're now going to jump into resolve. So leaders with resolve, they demonstrate that strong determination, courage, persistence. I know Lara, she's got the lion back there. That is resolve, always sticking to something. So they set that clear vision, that plan. They plan strategically. They execute their plans with confidence. Leaders with resolve, they do not give up. They don't give up easily. They don't use setbacks as excuses. Rather, they use them as opportunities to learn and grow, to develop resolve. Leaders should focus on developing their resilience, their mindset, and their goal-setting skills. So set those goals, those really big, hairy, audacious goals, those BHAGs, and then break those down into more digestible chunks so that you can really understand what your next step, your next rung on that ladder is. That's how you develop that resolve. Now, let's go to Theresa. I've read your book, Warrior. I know that you demonstrated resolve and you continue to demonstrate resolve daily. How has resolve been a part of your life, and how do you feel leaders can enhance their resolve?
Oh man, this is like a book in and of itself. But yes, resolve is, man, I wrote basically a timeline of different events that have gone in my life that I'd like to share, but I will keep it short and sweet for you all today. From a young age, I mean, I was told, so my mother passed away when I was 10, and before she passed, she told me, Theresa, life is unfair, because I wondered why bad people weren't dying, and she was, because she's my mother, and she told me life is unfair, but life has to go on. And while that seemed like a simple sentence then, in many times in my life when I've wanted to quit, because I wanted to quit so many times, I remember that, like, life has to go on and I need to keep moving forward. And so for me, I saw her be super resilient as a young mom going to die and being very strong for her family. And I saw my dad pick himself up and start a business and then eventually become a second vocation Catholic priest, basically going back and getting a doctorate, right, in theology at the age of like 56, right? And so I saw this in my own family, and it's part of me. So in where I am right now, I wouldn't be here if I didn't flex the resolve muscle, which essentially, if you really boil it down, it's taking action even in the midst of feeling like, I don't know, or doubt, or not having the motivation. It's taking action anyway. And I'll give you some examples of that. And actually the research points to the fact that if you do take action in your life with anything you want to do versus waiting for motivation, the motivation will come, versus waiting for motivation to happen to do something. You're going to probably wait your whole life, right? So, but some examples in my life of some resolve that really have led me to where I'm in my business now is, after the Marine Corps, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was, transitioning from the Marine Corps. I had struggled with a mental health condition that I had to get out for, which was an eating disorder. I had to figure out what was next. And it was really hard. And I had to go back to community college, after getting my bachelor's at Villanova, going back to community college in the middle of LA and doing prerequisites, which with a bunch of like 18 and 19-year-olds in physics and chemistry. And I remember standing at the community college campus going, WTF, or, what am I doing? And I remember what helped me get through community college, get through doing all my prereqs for PT school, getting my doctorate in PT, was remembering my why. I wanted to serve others. I wanted to help people like my mom who were sick and didn't have answers about their fitness, or help people with disabilities and help other people like myself who feel overwhelmed or burnt out in their life find health. And so that why was at my forefront. Going through community college, basically 2 years of community college, then another 2 years of getting prereqs, then getting a doctorate that took me 3 years, then starting a business, which by the way, isn't all peaches and cream when you start a business. It's not like, oh, I set up a business and a website and everyone's just coming to me and loves me. No, it takes time to build. And I built a business that I loved, that I also got burnt out in. And so having to pivot and figure out a way to do my business in a way that made sense for me and my family, and the way I could serve more people versus just one-on-one. So Movement RX started as a PT practice in CrossFit gyms across Southern California. And I taught for CrossFit across the globe. And yet that wasn't, at some point I realized, no, I wanted more and it needed to be different for me. So the resolve for me to say, okay, I got to pivot. I got to pivot in now, push into this space where I can work more digitally and do presentations and not give of myself every single hour to different people, which was causing me personally to burn out, allowed me to, I had to understand that maybe I would take a financial cut or a financial, I would struggle a little financially for a little bit until I found this new pivot and found my stride in this new pivot. But I kept the why at my forefront and I kept taking action. And yes, it was scary. And like, as Brene Brown, if anyone's a Brene Brown fan, I know you guys are, everyone here, but it's like, it is scary when you go out on your own and you're trying new things. And so I kept my why in front of me. I wanted to serve people and give them the knowledge and tools to be physically and emotionally free. And my path has been anywhere but linear, but it's led me to doing this work now. And it will probably continue to be anything but linear. However, along the way, every failure, I've chosen to look at it as growth. And while it's been very hard, it's like every failure point I've perceived or pivot point, it's like, okay, I'm still moving forward. Life must continue to go on. I still have my why in front of me and I've got a healthy family, right? So the resolve has been a big part actually of how I'm here. And it's, and I go back to that quote by Rocky Balboa. It's like, it's not how hard you hit, but how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. I mean, shoot, running a business and working to really impact people in a way that isn't really yet being done, like what we're doing with the leadership, the Buffalo Leadership Academy, you're going to take a lot of hard hits. And it just is the way it is. And growing a business, growing a family, there's going to be a lot of hard hits, and you got to have grace to keep moving forward, grace with yourself, grace with others, so you can forgive and let go. And because grace, as you were sharing, Philip, like you have to be able to have the grace to love and let go, because if you don't, you're going to be stuck in the past and stuck in your failures, perceived failures, and you're never going to move forward. And so now I'm like, bring it. Bring on the hard hits, because I'm moving through it. This is my goal, and I'm going to enjoy the journey of it. And that's another part about the resolve that I'll end with here, is that while, we've got to make pivots and we have our goals and I have my why, what's equally important is the journey of like knowing that in the resolve and in the struggle of growing a team, cultivating a team, having grace with yourself, being healthy, all of those things can be very hard, doing those things, but it can also be very amazing too at the same time. And the two don't have to be separate. It's like you can have, the journey can be amazing, and enjoying the journey is a part of it. Enjoying the journey of the struggle. Like the fact that, just a family example, getting my kids ready can take forever because they're 2 and 5, but that's the journey. That's the struggle. It's like, that's the beauty of life. The struggle of, okay, you know what, this isn't going to work in the business, isn't going to move the needle. I got to pivot this way. That's part of the journey, beautiful journey, the hard and the amazing part, versus being like, oh man, I wish that didn't happen to me. Why is this happening again? Versus like, all right, this is happening and life is also really amazing. So that's what I got to say about resolve.
I love it. I love it. And I love that you brought Rocky Balboa into the conversation. I mean, come on. I'm a fan of that quote and everything
Yes.
boxing. So, and I like to think of resolve as the combination of grit, not the acronym that we're talking about here, but the word grit, and resilience. And I love everything that you talked about there, because everything you discussed did involve a piece of grit and a piece of resilience, and that's resolve. So I love that. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, if you don't know what we're talking about, or if you don't know who we are some members of the Buffalo Leadership Academy, and we're talking about grit, but not your typical way of looking at it. G.R.I.T. That's grace, resolve, intuition, and trust. So we just had Theresa cover the resolve piece, and this is going to be available later for everyone to watch, but we're going to move on to intuition now. So intuition, it's defined as, if you will, the ability to understand and perceive situations beyond the surface level. Leaders with intuition can anticipate those challenges, identify ways to overcome those challenges, identify opportunities, and make informed decisions quickly. They have a deep understanding of their team members and can connect with them on a deeper level, a personal level. To develop intuition, leaders have to focus on developing their self-awareness, coming back to the EQ and EI that we were talking about before, the grace. Something that I love talking about, mindfulness. You have to work on being mindful. And I don't necessarily mean meditating, but just being present in the moment, aware, self-aware, and aware of your surroundings. And then reflection skills. You have to work on developing those. So to discuss the intuition a little further, I'm going to turn it over to Lara. Lara, in your experience, where does intuition come into play as a leader, and how would you recommend someone develop their intuition?
Well, John, such a great question. And actually what Dr. T was just saying leads very heavily into intuition, because basically the fundamental meaning of intuition is, we come to a conclusion through instinct rather than conscious rationalization. And I think where, there's a lot of leaders out there that obviously very logical thinkers, and you have to rationalize what you're doing and look at it on paper and say, okay, is this the right decision I'm making? But there's other times and other decisions where sometimes you have to go with what your gut is telling you. And that comes, to intuition. And it's not being afraid to make a decision based on that instinct. And a lot of that comes from trusting yourself. And obviously that's going to come from experience as well, but it's trusting yourself and just making, like you just said, John, making that assessment of a situation very quickly. And one of the tools and ways that I actually do it, just to give you a bit of personal example here, is I'll very quickly, if a situation comes to fruition, or maybe there's some unexpected challenge that comes up, whether it's in business life, even personal life, and you can very quickly visualize what the outcome's going to be depending on which route you take. And it's just having that ability to feed from the information that your brain has already received prior, and going with experience that you've learned throughout life and through developing, whether it's your business or, like I said, outside of that. And just having that ability to trust in your decision and not second guess yourself. That's where a lot of people will go wrong, is they'll second guess themselves and they won't go with what their first decision was, which often in times is actually the right decision, because it's the one that comes from the gut, right? And so in other words, what I'm trying to say here is having that intuition is going to give you the ability to just understand something without the need to rationally think it through. And so, relying on your instincts, solving problems quickly, just using that, what we call our inner guidance, if you will. And I think, one of the ways to be able to develop that on a much deeper level, in fact, you touched on some of these points already, Jon, but, having empathy is a huge one, and understanding people, because how you are is not how everybody else in the room is necessarily going to be. And so the more that you can understand other people on their level with however they communicate, and how you kind of pay attention to how they're decoding the message that you're giving to them, will give you that ability to be able to put yourself in their shoes in other situations. And so you can pull from that experience and that knowledge when you're faced with, say, an unexpected challenge, some type of adversity, or even if it's not adversity or an unexpected challenge, even if it's just, another decision in the business, or like what Dr. T was just saying, if there's something you think this isn't quite working, we're going to have to pivot. What are we going to do? You have to trust that gut. And where does that come from? It comes from your experience and the ability to put yourself in other shoes, identify different outcomes very quickly, visualize it, and say, okay, this is the outcome that I really want, so this is the route I need to go. So there is a heck of a lot of visualization that I use, when it comes to making a decision based on intuition. I will say this as well, that when it comes to intuition, it's, I like to, I don't say I'm necessarily a trend setter, right? But I don't follow the norm. Like, I will think outside that box. And it comes back to having that fixed mindset and growth mindset, and just pushing yourself past that boundary, and always saying, you know what, I'm not going to follow what everybody else is doing. I'm going to try and do something very different and think outside the box here, and do something that maybe others haven't thought of, or maybe they have thought of, but they haven't taken the action on it. And so I'm going to do both. And I'm going to show that, with my instinct, and also, visualizing that outcome, anything is possible. And personally, I actually thrive, and I use my intuition a lot here, when others tell me like it can't be done. I'll give you a couple of examples. One of them this morning, I actually pushed nearly 9 plates in with my other athletes today on the sled. And for those of our listeners that are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, each plate is 45 pounds. The sled is about 100, so it's around 435 pounds or something I pushed this morning, close to. And it's interesting, because I think there were others that maybe thought, well, she might not be able to do that. Maybe I'm not as strong as some of the others. I don't look as strong as some of the others. But I'll tell you this, you put your mind to anything, and you just know in your gut that you can do it because you visualize yourself doing it. I mean, I got on that no problem, and I pushed it. And I want to give a real life example of where intuition actually made me who I am today. And that is when I first came to America, or even before that, when I first made the decision to come to America. I can't tell you how many people, thought I was absolutely crazy, walking away from a 6-figure salary, from a life where, I built up a great reputation, a lot of people knew me, to suddenly come into a brand new country where nobody knew me. But I had something in my gut that told me it was now or never. That was nearly 7 years ago. And rolling on a little bit, maybe about a year, maybe not even quite a year, it was about 8 months into that move, I hit some hard times, and it was difficult. And I came to like a crossroads in my path where I thought, I've got to make a decision here. And, what do I do? Like, on paper, everything's telling me to just go back to England. But my gut and my instinct was telling me, you're not going back. You're going to stay here, and you're going to follow that dream and that vision. And even though there were so many others out there that just said, Lara, just come back to England. You could walk into a 6-figure job, everything's going to be fine. And like Dr. T said, starting a business is, not for the faint-hearted, and it's certainly no easy road. And so that's where, I was having, ups and downs, and I was trying to, figure things out and so forth. But with that gut instinct, my goodness, am I glad that I listened to that instinct and I said, no, I'm going to continue on this path. I can visualize, what I'm trying to build here. And I wanted to build this empire and all these different avenues of the business that's going to really impact not just companies, but individuals, and whether it's in their personal life as well as in their business life, and teams, and help people be able to communicate better and enhance their performance in no matter what area of their life. But predominantly I focus on leadership. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be sitting here right now talking with all of you and talking to our listeners. I'd probably be back in England in some job that I probably would regret, making a decision of coming back. So, in other words, being an intuitive leader, like what I just displayed there with my own personal experiences, you've got to have that higher sense of empathy, right? You've got to be able to you've got to have the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes. You've got to have that self-awareness that you mentioned, John, and you've got to practice that mindfulness and being present, not always just focusing on the future, but actually being present in that moment. And you've got to absolutely have focus. You've got to be laser focused and dialed in with what you're doing in that moment. And just to add a couple more things to that, if you're able to do that and pull from various experiences in your life, from prior knowledge that your brain's got, and just making that decision quickly, not second guessing yourself, and just piecing it together very quickly. And you do practice that mindfulness that we talked about every day, and being aware of your situation and your surroundings and your environment. That's just going to allow you to have more access to that intuition, and just evolve your thoughts and break out of that comfort zone. And ultimately, that's going to be able to help you assemble a team much more quickly, and inspire them to work together to find solutions. So you can speed up response times as well, and you'll develop that very deep sense of knowing, if that makes sense. So yeah, to answer the question, that the last part of how do you do that, it really comes from experience, practice, and you got to learn, and also take on constructive feedback. Don't be afraid with that. Take the constructive feedback on. And I'm just going to end with step out of your comfort zone every day.
That's right. Laura asked me a few weeks ago. She drew a couple of concentric circles, and inside the middle circle was your comfort zone. She said, "How do you feel when you're inside this comfort zone?" And I think she expected me to say, "Well, I feel like I'm loving life and I'm very comfortable and happy." And I said, "You know what? I feel uncomfortable in my comfort zone. I want to push myself. I want to push my team. I want to push my colleagues and friends and family even, because I think that's what makes us better and ties us together." And I love that you brought in the example of you're starting your business here in America, bringing yourself over here with not knowing anyone, because that actually ties into what we're doing here today, right now. The five of us didn't really know one another 6 months ago. And we have an intuition as a group that we wanted to do this Buffalo Leaders Conference, which has now evolved into the Buffalo Leadership Academy. And we're not guaranteed that this is going to be a success. But I tell you what, I can feel it in my gut. And I see the heads shaking up and down here in the boxes. We can feel it because that intuition is strong, and we've developed that over time. So I love that. So again, for those who are just joining us, we are the Buffalo Leaders from the Buffalo Leadership Academy. We're talking about grit and how important it is for leaders. But again, and for those who have been tuned in since the beginning, forgive me as I keep reiterating this, but I want to make sure those who are tuning in late hear this. We're talking about G.R.I.T, grit as an acronym: grace, resolve, intuition, and trust. So Laura, thanks so much for what you just covered on trust. And now we're going to get into the foundation of so much leadership, the foundation that I honestly think a lot of the grace, resolve, and intuition is built upon, and that is the trust. So no pressure, Travis, when I turn it over to you here in a second, because it's the foundation, or at least I believe it's a big foundation of so much. So let's talk about trust. As I mentioned, trust, foundation of any successful team. With Philip and myself, when we make entry on a room that's going in to, shoot the enemy potentially, we line up with other people with weapons behind us. And we enter this room trusting that, one, they're not going to shoot us in the back, and two, that when we enter this room, they've got us covered. They're going to shoot the enemy. They're going to neutralize the enemy as they're potentially looking to neutralize us. And we trust that they've got that zone of the room or the area covered. So trust in the SEAL teams is huge, not just as we're entering a room, but also with our gear, right? And Philip, I can see you smiling already. We have these rooms that are just full of cages of our stuff. And they've got locks on them, and you can lock them. But more often than not, you walk into these rooms that are just giant locker rooms, and these cages are left open with all our gear there because we trust one another. We trust one another, and we can do that. And that trust bleeds over from the locker room and from lining up in the stack outside the room before we take it into everything that we do, into our lives. So leaders who prioritize that trust building, they create that safe and secure work environment. Philip touched on that before, that psychological safety and how important grace is in developing that. Leaders with trust are transparent. Lara touched on having that beginner's mindset or that growth mindset, that versus that fixed mindset. The fixed mindset, the people are not willing to admit that they don't know everything. They want to be the smartest person in the room, or at least be perceived as the smartest person in the room. So we have to be transparent. We have to communicate openly, and that's both ways, and demonstrate integrity in our actions. One of the first things we learn when we go through military training is integrity. If you ask most people out in town, hey, what values do you see in a military member? You're going to see courage, honesty, integrity mentioned quite often. So we have to have that integrity demonstrated, not just in what we say, but everything that we do. And then they're also accountable for their decisions and take ownership of their mistakes. I know Philip always likes to say, hey, what's the 3 words that are so important in the SEAL teams? I screwed up, right? Admitting that you've made some type of mistake. That shows that you're open to being vulnerable. I see mentioned over in the comments here, grace is not a sign of weakness, grace is a strength. Well, vulnerability is a strength as well. So we have to be able to admit and own up to our mistakes. And then finally, we need to focus on building that strong relationship with our team members, setting clear expectations, and then leading by example. Not ever asking our people to do something that we're not willing to do ourselves. All right, now, Travis, you're about to be in the spotlight. Trust is something we really try to live and breathe in the military, as I mentioned. And sure, there are definitely those who do not live up to that, do not exhibit it. But for the most part, the military really tries to instill that sense of trust in all of us. What general examples do you have of trust deepening your faith in a leader, and or the opposite? And how does one build trust?
Yeah. John, no, I'm glad you saved this last one for me. This is huge for me. Trust is like without trust, a leader really has nothing. So in the Marine Corps, Dr. T, the other Dr. T, our motto is Semper Fidelis. So what that translates to is always faithful, which can be very, very synonymous with trust. And my battalion commander, when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, I showed up to our unit, 1st Light Armor Reconnaissance Battalion, as this 23-year-old, wide-eyed, didn't have a clue what I was doing in life in general, but I was a Marine and I was ready to go wherever that go may take me. And I met our battalion commander, I didn't know him from anybody, but he was in charge of our entire battalion. So just looking at him, he just exuded this power that you would think of in a Marine Corps lieutenant colonel. But there was something different about him as well. You could tell that he really truly cared about us. He cared about what we thought. He cared about the mission incredibly. And as we started doing workups, as we worked up towards Iraq, he was out in front, always leading, always talking to the people. He was never the guy that would sit in his war room, as they call it, and just kind of play chess with our lives. He was there. He was talking to us about it, and we went to Iraq, and it was just this sense of like, okay, he's been here, he's seen it, we've seen him putting in the work, we know we can trust him. So carry on to Afghanistan another year later, the same thing, and it even increased. Just you could tell the kind of leader he was, the kind of integrity that he had as a leader. To be able to building up trust was one of his key foundations of the entire battalion, not just his leadership group, but building the trust of the battalion. And then our last operation down in southern Afghanistan, he jumps up on top of the LAVs and talks to everybody. There's about probably a couple hundred of us getting ready to go just take this town, and he's up on top of the LAV, and we've known him for 2.5 years, and he's just pumping us up. And we know that what he is saying is true because of his actions in the past. He's showed us that he's the real deal. He's showed us that he has the stuff. He's showed us he's proven to us that he's going to take care of us. And you can't just say those things. Hey, if I say, hey John, let's go on this hike, I promise I'll take care of you. Just take my word for it. Like, I don't think, no, that's not going to happen. But if we've trained together, if we've built up a relationship, if I've gone with you on training hikes, then you're going to trust me. So translating that into kind of a theoretical lens, forgive me for 1 second, I'm going to put on the EDD hat, and I promise I'll take it off right after this. But transformational leadership is one of my favorite leadership theories. I studied it inside and out, and it has has 4 components to it, but 2 of the core components when it comes to trust are individual consideration and idealized influence. So individual consideration is exactly what it sounds like. As a leader, you need to be able to individually consider each of the people that work for you, what they need, how they need it, and how they like to receive information. You have to individually consider each person and how they need to be led, and then lead them in accordance with what the organizational structure and everything else is, in accordance to what they need. Always looking out for what's best for the team. And then we talk about idealized influence. Now, idealized influence is this who you are on and off the battlefield, in and out of the boardroom. That means that you exude this presence of trust, whether you are out in town after 5 o'clock, whether you're on a Zoom call, whether you're on the Buffalo Leadership Series and you're spouting out whatever you're doing, you're always the same person, and you're building up trust because that's who you are. You have that integrity about you. And really, without those two idealized influence and individual consideration, those two key ingredients to building trust on a team, it's incredibly difficult. You have to know your people. You have to know you have to be this leader that other people are going to look up to, because leaders, they are looked up to. It's just a part of the job. This is part of what happens. So that's why leading from the front, being able to do what you say and say what you do, and being the guy, being the man or woman of action, to be able to show people how to do it rather than just tell people. So yeah, again, John, super glad that I got the trust part of this acronym, because it's foundational. If you build it and if you maintain it, you will be able to sustain a team for years and years to come. If you break it, it takes a long time to refill that bucket up. And oftentimes that bucket has a giant hole in it. You can just keep pouring into it, and it's never going to get full. So trust, really difficult to obtain, especially as a leader of big teams, small teams, military teams, whatever it is, families. Really hard to build up and maintain. But the second it's lost, almost impossible to get back.
I'm so glad you touched on that piece, because I've seen leaders that I have trusted, and then they had a moment where they faltered in their decision, and they did something that I lost my trust in them, and most of them never gained it back. Because, like you said, there's a hole in that bucket, and I love that kind of visualization there. So this has been amazing, guys. What you've shared today here, it's invaluable. Your insights, your experience, your knowledge. You truly are a herd of buffaloes, and I'm honored to be amongst you guys. For the audience today, grit, G.R.I.T. That's what we're talking about. The grace, the resolve, the intuition, the trust, G.R.I.T. That's capturing the key traits, or what we feel are some of the key traits that leaders need to be effective. And by developing that grace, that resolve, that intuition, that trust, leaders can navigate through those challenging situations, those storms that we talked about. You can run into that storm, and not just run into that storm, but run into it and thrive in it. You inspire your team members, and then you create a positive and productive work environment. For those of you who joined us today, we hope you've enjoyed your time and that you've taken something away from this. If you'd like to know more about what we're doing as a team and about the Buffalo Leadership Conference, text the word Buffalo to 33777. Again, that's Buffalo to 33777. Thank you guys so much. You're an amazing team. And again, I'm honored to work with you. And for those who tuned in, thank you all and have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thanks, y'all.
See you guys. God bless.